Careless in Red, a story about the Dear Lady by Emerson's Dead. All my life I had heard stories about her, how she was a symbol of protection and love, but also something that didn't shy away from true justice, even if it meant death. I remember hearing a story about a hunter who would drive through the reservations and look for women walking alone. He would kidnap them and take them into the woods, and they would never be seen again. This happened until one day he went missing himself. It was weeks until his body was found by another hunter and his son. It was said that he was found with an antler stabbed into his chest and with what looked like hoof imprints all over his chest, face, and legs. The local authorities chalked it up to being an animal attack, but the indigenous people knew better. Who was the Dear Lady? If you don't know or haven't heard about the Dear Lady, it is said that she is beautiful and tall, but when you look down at her feet, you'll see that they aren't feet. They're hooves. And by the time you realize what it is you're looking at, it's too late. But she didn't kill just anyone. No. She sought after those who were causing harm to the land and to abusive men who preyed and abused women and children. I've never told anyone, but I myself have seen her. I know what you're thinking. There's no way you saw the Dear Lady and lived. That's not how it works. But, you see, she wasn't after me. And to be honest, she probably saved my life. It was a day like any other. I woke up on my day off, and you see, when I was younger, I was very active. I'd love to go for runs, and especially loved a good hike. This particular morning, I felt a desire to go to a specific trail, one I had never been to before, and today felt like the perfect day to go. So I got up, took my shower, and got ready. I made sure to smudge up before I left and said a little prayer to the Creator for always keeping me safe and healthy. Maybe this was the difference in the story. I drove up the mountain and entered through a winding road called Bear Creek Road. I eventually made it to the trail, and it felt like it was my lucky day. There was only one car in the parking lot, a little blue Ford Ranger pickup. Looked like I beat the crowd. I eagerly snatched my water bottle and backpack, which was filled with a couple of bags of trail mix, granola bars, and some sandwiches I had ready for the day. I know most people love to enjoy the sounds of nature and the wind blowing through the trees, but I like to listen to music on my hikes, or even a good podcast. Today, I chose a horror podcast and placed the headphones in my ears and began at the trailhead. This trail had two trails to it, one that went all the way around the mountain, or one that looped back and was only about a mile or so. Today I had time, so I chose the full trail. As I was walking, I received an alert on my phone that there was a manhunt nearby, and that the suspect was known to be armed and dangerous. This person had a history of assault and violence, particularly towards women. I realized I didn't have my knife or anything I could use to protect myself with, so I bent down and grabbed a thick branch and looked for the strongest rock I could find and began making a spearhead with it. I did this while I walked It was actually pretty therapeutic. I continued walking and received another alert. It was about the manhunt, but this one showed a picture of the car that the suspect was known to be driving. I tapped the notification and immediately stopped walking. I dropped the spear and just stared at my phone. The picture of the vehicle the suspect was traveling in was the same one that was parked in the parking lot. Blue Ford Ranger pickup. I knew it was the same car, and my heart began to leap out of my chest. My mouth grew dry as I looked up and scoped around to see if anyone was around me. At this point, I was about 2 hours into my hike, and I knew I should turn around and just call it. That's when I heard it. A loud scream coming from what felt like every direction. I knew it wasn't from behind me, so I knew that was the safest bet to make. But what if someone was in trouble? Would I be able to live with myself if I just turned around and left? Fight or flight? And I was choosing flight. I looked down at the spear and made a spontaneous decision that maybe I could help save this person, when again, I heard another scream. This time, the person was screaming, I raced ahead, leaving my backpack and gripping tightly to the spear. I was mentally prepared to do whatever it is I had to do to help. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 and raced away with the call on speaker.
911, what's the nature of your emergency?
I answered and pleaded that I had heard screaming coming from the location of the manhunt when I heard the operator repeat,
911, what's the nature of your emergency?
And that's when the call officially dropped. I was in disbelief because this whole time I was able to receive these alerts, and now that I was using my phone, it was completely useless. I continued on and heard another scream when suddenly it sounded like it was cut off. I stopped and tiptoed ahead, and that's when I saw her. She had him up against a tree with an antler stabbed into his chest. He had a gun in his hand and he dropped it. She backed up as he fell to the ground. He tried to reach for the gun when she stepped on his arm, and that's when I knew it was the dear lady. When she stepped on his arm, I saw it. The hooves. She had hooves for feet, and antlers sticking out from her head. I gasped out, "Oh shit," when she turned around and saw me. I was frozen. Everything in me was telling me to turn around and run, but I couldn't. See, while I was terrified, I was also in awe of her beauty. She didn't seem murderous, malicious, or evil at all. She began to step away when the man screamed for help, as she lunged her back leg and struck his head twice with her hooves, bashing it in. She stepped towards me, and while doing so, she stepped on his foot, completely bending it backwards. She came up to me and uttered, "Your ancestors, they walk with you. They guide you. And right now, they're protecting you. You're not bad, and you have no intentions to be." She leaned forward, and her forehead met mine, and we were face to face with our nose and our foreheads touching. She closed her eyes, and when I saw this, I closed mine. When I opened them, she was gone. I spun around and couldn't even hear the sound of her walking away. I turned back to the tree, and the man's face was bashed in, with stab marks all over his body. He had a bag next to him filled with gloves and zip ties sticking out. I could also see a handful of wallets, and that's when I knew this was the suspect of the manhunt. I looked at him and grabbed my phone and thought to try and call the police when I realized maybe this motherfucker deserves to rot. After all, the dear lady herself made the judgment call, and who was I to go against that? Clearly he was a terrible person, so I backed up and I left. This was my experience and encounter with the dear lady. I don't know why she spared me that day, but I'd like to think that my ancestors were truly protecting me, and they truly have been guiding me my entire life. And Creator, I put a good head on my shoulders. I will forever be grateful that my life was spared that day, and that judgment wasn't casted upon me. But let this be a warning to you, to any man out there who seeks out harm against women or children or to the land. She will find you, and you will not be spared. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of my new podcast series, Croak. A project where I not only write horror stories and turn them into audiobooks, but I also turn them into songs and music videos as well. This week's episode was Careless in Red, the Dear Lady story. Written, produced, and edited by me, Anthony Vibanco, aka Emerson's Dead. Be sure to follow along here or wherever you listen to your podcast. Future stories will include stories about vampires, skinwalkers, the dear lady, and other horror themes. I would like to take this time to educate my listeners on missing murdered Indigenous women, also known as MMIW. Indigenous women and children are among the highest percentage to be targeted to face violence and to go missing, with most resulting in unsolved cases. This is a real epidemic, and the National Crime Information Center reported that in 2016 there were 5,712 reports of missing American Indian and Alaskan Native women and girls. Although the U.S. Department of Justice's Federal Missing Person Database, NamUs, only logged 116 of these cases. Murder is also the third leading cause of death for Native women. MMIW exists to bring awareness through organizing marches, building databases of the missing, holding local community, city council, and tribal council meetings, and conducting domestic violence trainings and other informational sessions for police. For more information, you can visit www.nativehope.org.